exorcism is a ritual religious practice used to expel demons or other spiritual entities from suspected victims of possession. The exorcism ritual is practiced in many different religions, but the most widely portrayed in media is the exorcisms of the Roman Catholic Church. From movies like The Exorcist to The Rite, exorcisms are portrayed as violent, supernatural, and potentially deadly for those involved, from the possessed to the priests. While this is certainly not the norm, there have been cases of death during exorcisms. The most famous being the case we're talking about today, the real story that the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose was based on. This is a brief history of Anneliese Michel. As always, this episode of A Brief History contains graphic content and may not be suitable for all audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Anna Elizabeth Michel was born on September 21st, 1952, in West Germany to Anna and Joseph Michel. Called Anneliese by her family, her mother had been disgraced before she was even born. Anna's first daughter, Martha, was illegitimate, and as punishment for her sins, Anna was forced to wear a black veil on her wedding day. Anneliese was the second daughter for Anna and the first legitimate for the family, and Anna believed that she could atone for her previous sins by pushing her religious devotion onto her first legitimate daughter. The family attended Mass twice a week and were devout Christians, with Anneliese even choosing to sleep on a bare stone floor to suffer for the sins of homeless drug addicts and other damned souls. Fast forward to 1968, when Anneliese was just 16 years old. She began suffering from convulsions and periods of being blacked out. Friends and family who witnessed these incidents say that it seemed like she was in a trance-like state, and her problems would only grow. Just a year later, she began suffering convulsions again, and woke up one morning in a trance after having wet her bed as a 17-year-old girl. Concerned for their daughter's well-being, Anna and Joseph took Anneliese to the doctor, where a neurologist diagnosed her with epilepsy, a disorder that, for Anneliese, caused seizures that would have her lose consciousness and violent muscle contractions and spasms. The specific type of epilepsy that Anneliese had, temporal lobe epilepsy, can also be the cause of Geschwin syndrome, which is marked by hyperreligiosity, in line with Anneliese's life. Anneliese was given medication for her epilepsy, but it supposedly caused the young girl hallucinations. After she began taking the medications, Anneliese complained of seeing what she called demonic creatures. In 1973, Anneliese graduated from high school and began attending university in the hopes of becoming a teacher. Her classmates described her as extremely religious and withdrawn, and Anneliese was known to spend much of her time in her room praying over pictures of saints. During this time, however, Anneliese was simply trying to do anything she could to distract herself from the mounting faces and voices she had started to see and hear. During her prayers, Anneliese would hear voices telling her that she was damned and that she would rot in hell, and around every corner there were demon faces following her. It got so bad that Anneliese started to become intolerant of religious places and objects like churches and crucifixes. In hopes to stop whatever ailment she was suffering, Anneliese attended a pilgrimage to San Damiano with a family friend. During the trip, the family friend noted that Anneliese smelled horrendous, refused to drink holy water, and couldn't even bear to walk past a crucifix. It was this family friend that first suggested that Anneliese may be under the influence of demonic possession. The suggestion of being possessed stuck with Anneliese, and she began searching for a member of the church to perform an exorcism on her and relieve her of her hallucinations. Every priest she approached rejected her and suggested that she seek medical help and not spiritual help. But Anneliese, and in turn her family, weren't prepared to give up on helping her save her soul. As time went on, Anneliese spiraled further and further away from sanity, doing hundreds of squats a day, eating spiders and coal, barking like a dog for days on end, and other increasingly concerning behaviors. Eventually, a priest by the name of Ernst Alt was found by the family, and he agreed to get the wheels turning on an exorcism for the young woman. Bishop Joseph Stangl was petitioned by the family and the priest and eventually approved the exorcism, which would be led with another local priest, Arnold Rentz. But the exorcism would have to be carried out entirely in secret, as per the bishop's rules. Rentz and Alt performed 2 unsuccessful exorcisms on the girl, where she ended up eating insects, licked her urine up off the floor, and did her very best to harm herself despite restraints. In 1975, Anneliese claimed that the Virgin Mary had visited her and instructed her to do penance for lost souls. The family began to believe that Anneliese was a chosen victim soul, someone who would suffer for the sins of others. And Anneliese plunged even further into her supposedly demonic state. Over the next 10 months, Anneliese went through 67 more rites of exorcism, and each of the exorcisms became more concerning than the last, with Anneliese eventually rupturing the ligaments in her knees and breaking bones from the amount of genuflection she would have to do in a single day, and her convulsions returned. The priests involved recorded almost all of their sessions with Anneliese, and while these are available to listen to online, please note that they are disturbing. After nearly a year of exorcisms and physical and psychological trauma, Anneliese Michel had stopped eating and eventually died of dehydration and malnourishment at 23 years old. Her last words were, "Mother, I'm afraid." Both Joseph and Anna Michel, as well as the priests who performed the exorcisms, were all charged with the negligent homicide of Anneliese Michel. They used the recordings of the exorcisms in the trial to attempt to prove that the girl had in fact been possessed, and both priests involved were found guilty of manslaughter resulting from negligence. Both of the men were sentenced to 6 months in jail and 3 years probation, which was later suspended. Joseph and Anna were also charged with manslaughter resulting from negligence, but did not receive any punishment for their involvement in their daughter's death, as the court claimed they had suffered enough. In 2005, the movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose was released, having been very loosely based on the story of Anneliese Michel. The movie follows the modern-day court case of a priest being charged with negligent homicide for performing an allegedly deadly exorcism on a young woman named Emily Rose. It's one of those movies that is both loved and hated by critics and people alike, but does a good job of delving into the terrified young woman's devout spirituality and why a family may ignore a medical diagnosis in favor of a spiritual diagnosis. The sad fact of the matter is that Anneliese Michel knowingly suffered from temporal lobe epilepsy, had a difficult upbringing believing that she was simply alive to atone to her mother's sins prior to marriage, and it has been speculated after her death that Anneliese additionally suffered from schizophrenia. Due to the imposition of their religious beliefs, Joseph, Anna, and the 2 priests involved allowed a mentally ill young woman to suffer and ultimately perish for their beliefs. Anneliese's grave is still a pilgrimage site for many devout Christians who believe that she had suffered in place of them for their own sins. Feel free to leave your thoughts on this case in the comments below. Thank you for joining me for another episode of A Brief History. Thank you to my patrons who support this series. You are so appreciated. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime Sims content every Friday or sometimes Saturday. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.